the red button has been pressed. Things are moving. Hey, Holly.
Hey, Dave.
How's it going?
It's great. It's going great.
I'm
doing great. How are you?
all of those greats.
Yes.
Doing all the greats. Okay, well, that's wonderful.
How are you?
I'm really good. Happy summer.
Happy summer to you.
We're past the 4th of July now. We're in the heart of summer.
Fully into summer.
Yeah, although it's overcast and kind of ugly. And, what are you going to do?
Hot. Well, it's L.A. hot.
It's L.A. hot.
Yeah. There's our weather report.
I don't know what that means.
Move along.
Okay, yeah, move along. What's the Doppler say? Got the Doppler 7000?
No,
Pull
I
that
mean,
out.
LA hot is still, it's not as hot as, Florida hot or now West Coast hot. I mean, East Coast hot. They're having a heat wave. European hot. They're having a heat wave.
It's a very pleasant hot. But it's earthquake weather. Fun stuff.
We have a guest.
Yes. Normally we're taking a break from counting down all the hits from KROQ and looking at old music that we listened to 30 years ago. Now we're going to talk visually about music.
This is very exciting.
It's very exciting. I mean, we've talked videos, but one of the great things about music is it's also the visual forum. Went to the record store.
It's a musical journey.
Yeah, exactly. You look... You go to the record store, you look through, you kind of peruse, and sometimes there was an album that caught your attention. You don't know why. I didn't know this
or
band.
Who even, yeah.
Right, exactly. But something about the cover maybe caught your attention. Maybe something about the logo caught your attention. You could hold these things and kind of look through them. And
sometimes you could even open them up.
Yes.
You can open the dual, for example.
The gatefolds.
Yep.
As she opens up, Holly is opening up an album.
Thank you.
And looking through it. Thank you.
What do you call it?
It's a gatefold.
Gatefold.
Yeah. Our guest probably knows that. You know him possibly from the Deeply Graphic podcast. We have another podcaster on our show.
Yay!
This is exciting.
Or if you're just a listener of What Difference Does It Make, you know him from our beautiful and awesome logo.
There you go.
Yeah. So this is Nick Longo of the Deeply Graphic podcast. Also, you know him as Professor Longo. He's a professor at Cal State Northridge.
Yep.
A professor of what?
What? Please tell us a little bit about yourself. Please identify yourself, caller.
Like you said, I'm Nick Longo. I've known Dave since back in the junior high days.
Shout out to Columbus.
Yeah,
that is a long-ass time ago.
Not that long ago.
Columbus Junior High.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went separate ways for high school and then back to Cal State Northridge and other areas. But I run a branding and design company. That's kind of like what I love to do the most as far as logo development, you name it, anything for brands. And on the side, what I started about 4 or 5 years ago is I joined a podcast called the Deeply Graphic Design Cast, which talks specifically to independent designers. It's like how to make your business run better, you name it. And then I teach at Cal State Northridge as well, and I teach branding and packaging and graphic design. So packaging is right along the line of what we're talking about today.
Which
is?
Is?
Everything.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of our favorite 80s albums. I'm sure some dip into the 70s, 80s.
Nope, mine are strictly 80s, but we're talking album covers.
Yes, we're gonna go over album covers and some iconic album or band logos.
Perfect.
That work. Why they work? Maybe why they're effective. Because some of these logos are iconic. You can just look at the font and you would know,
totally.
even if they didn't spell what the actual band is, you would know exactly what that band is who that band is.
Imagine Dave Sloan written in AC/DC's font. You
right.
know right off the bat.
With a lightning bolt.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's how
don't you write it that way? Isn't that your signature?
I should always do that.
You should.
Oh, good idea. We're already getting good ideas here.
Dot the I with a lightning bolt.
All right, so let's start at the kind of the beginning of our podcast in that we needed a logo. We need something that kind of effectively conveyed the message that this is an 80s podcast. It's about music. It's going to be fun. And we looked online for some sort of font, and we found like these cheesy 80s themes that, I don't know, it was always in black and white or, like a checkerboard type thing, something basic. And it was, Holly was like, that one's okay. It just never conveyed what we wanted it to say.
Yeah. And it's an emotional thing. You have an emotional connection to it. And if you don't, you don't. There's nothing that's branding to me. And
but we didn't, we kind of knew what we wanted, but it's hard to describe in so many words to someone, like, this is what we want it to look like. Just make it look like that.
You obviously conveyed it to Nick.
Well, I kind of told him exactly that, and you came up with something that worked immediately. I don't think we
first shot. No.
We didn't workshop this at all.
No.
This was just like you came up
Zero
with this thing.
revisions. Dude.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
Yeah, like this is what
we're
this is
easy
it.
customers.
Apparently. So what were you kind of go through the process?
I think that you nailed it by saying a lot of times, and it probably goes for every album cover you've ever looked at as even a listener or a lover of music, is that there was the band or there was the group that was behind the band and then the artist that did it. And it's the communication that they have to make sure that you tell the artist, the designer, what your expectation is, what your objective is. Like, look at most of the things we're going to talk about today. They have to stand out from a crowd of hundreds, if not more, on the shelves. Obviously, it's a different story now because of how digital we've become. But these are like iconic things that people will remember. So you want to have the conversation so a designer can meet your expectations quite quickly, and you're not just throwing stuff on the wall and hoping it's going to be something that works. You have to have that conversation. And it's kind of like what I do with every client. You really dig deep, and you do a lot of paperwork. You do a lot of kind of like research and development to make sure you're getting on long lines. Because I want to show you one or two things, and you go, "Wow, I can't even decide." Like, what,
right.
That it has to be that close to what your expectation is.
This is a big issue with branding when because I also spent time working in this business, in that business, which I'll fill you in on later. But it's what is really difficult is when a client comes to you and they want something, they want their TV spot to look this way, or they want their graphics to look this way, but you say, but this isn't representative of your brand. You may like this visually, but it has to be representative of your brand. And that's for me, that was the biggest sticking point.
Yeah.
I mean, for this, but also, for I work with a company that produces TV commercials for radio stations.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So when it could be beautiful visually, the sound could be great, but it has to be representative of your brand completely, or you're going to turn the listener may tune in. If it's a radio station, the listener may tune in, but if they're not getting what they saw in the commercial, then they're not going to tune in again.
Exactly.
So anyway,
and to that point too, you got to think about the consumer is the ultimate person who's going to buy this album, who's going to buy that, whatever the product you're selling it is in an ad. So sometimes it's not even the artist, meaning the band, who should it's so subjective, right? Like, it's like, I think they are now more than ever thinking about who their target audience is. What does that album cover have to say to them to buy and purchase it and to make that click?
yes,
Right? But then there's these ones that take so many chances, and I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of them down the road, but that have become iconic, and they probably didn't give a damn about who the consumer is.
Right.
They just were like, we're the band, this is what we're feeling, this represents the album that we're making, and let's do it.
you have to feel pretty strongly. To do that, you have to feel pretty strongly about it, and
I give
some work.
I
and
give
some
a lot
don't.
of those people props, even for just trying, because there's been a lot of failures. For every success, there's probably like hundreds of failures when something like that happens.
Right.
Like, let's take a risk, let's try something, and I'm all about that. But then, like, if there's dollars and a record company behind you saying you got to sell, I'm sure a lot of them have agreed to stuff that they didn't even like.
For sure.
But someone told them this is going to connect to your listener.
Or if it doesn't, they can't be. The band is not responsible for it if they're spending somebody else's money.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Who's paying the bills?
Yeah.
So what were you thinking with what means 80s to you? Because with our logo, what you put in there was a little bit of black and with
Blue,
like
the
blue, like a teal type color.
You gave me a bunch of stuff to kind of think about, kind of in reference to where you were, what you had in mind. But I think to be a little rough around the edges is probably one thing, because one thing that I was thinking about was everything that you're probably going to be talking about in your podcast, and the music itself being very rebellious and being, the 80s was that time to experiment. Like, I don't think there's ever been a time where you have such a wide variety of music being produced and played. So your logo should have the same thing. It was a little like experimental. It's a little rough around the edges, right? And it's stacked. It's not centered. It's like, I think sometimes if it's too pretty, too finessed, it doesn't feel authentic. And then you guys are audio only, so like it should do most of the talking for you guys.
Yeah.
Visually, you're going to do a lot of talking, but visually you need something to complement it. So if it gets too specific, it might not someone might be browsing, because think about it. It's those little icons that we look at on the podcast screen.
Yes.
Right? And there's a science behind what's working and what's not. For some of the ones I've been a part of, or some of the ones I'm a big fan of, they use bright, vivid expression colors that they want to own themselves. So no one else has that color. So when you're looking and you see that bright magenta, you know exactly what it is. Or if you're seeing that blue come through with the contrast of the black, people get it immediately.
Yeah.
And it's easy to read. You don't want to put something in there that's chicken scratch and no one can read it. Because let's say someone refers your podcast to somebody else and they want to be like, I know the name, but I just, let me see if I can find it. Because a lot of times it's hard to search and all you want to see is that visual.
Have you gone on somebody's phone that you're with to try and find the podcast for you and subscribe them to it? Yeah. So I type in our name, and even without really seeing it, you can see the black with the blue logo, and you know it immediately. And I say black with blue, and
so identifiable.
And then we're seeing it at the size of like smaller than a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Where else are you really seeing it other than on probably your smart device or whatever? So you have to let it make sure it stands out. There's a big thing now in design called minimal design, and it's really the reason because of smartphones and everything else. Whereas this is where brands and bands and whatever the branding is for it, plays the most, because you're not seeing them in stores anymore. You're not seeing them on billboards. You're seeing them on your smartphone. So the more minimal and clear the design is, but then there's the balance of saying, but we got to throw in personality. We got to have, it can't just be Helvetica.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I'm sure everyone knows what Helvetica is.
I love Helvetica.
And I love the font you chose. It's simple and it's
but it has
blocky.
It has character.
Exactly.
So it's like you want to say the most with the least.
Yeah.
If that's my golden rule when it comes to design. Say the most with the least.
Sorry, I bow at the feet of you guys.
There you go.
Talented graphic designers. I'm serious. I'm not.
No, it's a gift, of course.
And I
really
bet we can probably use that for a lot of the examples we're going to look at.
Yep.
Hold it to that and see if it's saying a lot with the least amount of elements.
Yes. Right. Hey, why don't we take a break here?
Perfect. Okay, let's stop right now. We'll get right back to it. Yeah, it was a good.
Had a donut, coffee.
Donuts and coffee are good here. Well, let's go back a little bit in time to the 80s.
Yeah.
What grabbed you? Like, what do you remember from like visually of the 80s? What strikes you as like
when when you close your eyes? What do you think?
Yeah, like what?
I see floating graphic shapes. I see a lot of like neon. I see a lot of like highlighted, almost like lit from behind graphics and design. Then on the flip side, I also see kind of were the birth of what we saw with grunge and like more gritty, raw, you name it, like taking a chance, doing something different. Mm-hmm. But it's easy to look back at it now and see it as a whole. But I think if you were to put yourself back in the mid 80s, I don't think you would know what it was going to look like.
Yeah,
in the future.
Or that this was going to be quintessentially 80s.
Looking at where we worked at the time, it was so 80s. I mean, I worked at the Gap. She worked at Camp Beverly Hills.
Oh, my God.
You worked at Aka Joe. Yeah, she worked at Topeka Plaza.
And the Gap.
Yeah. Oh, and the Gap, yes.
And the Gap.
So, I mean, those, when you think of the clothing. Into the Gap. Yeah, the clothing there was just.
Yeah. I mean, you remember even the graphic stripes of the Gap with and it's almost, that's made a resurgence. That's kind of fresh and new now. It's kind of called retro and groovy, but it's being used because it has to stand out. It works today the same way it worked back in that day.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it's hard to, I think everyone has a different take on because I think of the 80s that we see now, the way, if someone's going to throw an 80s party, let's call it, you can almost exactly guess what the party favors and everything are going to look like, right? It's all VH1 and Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
which
is really not whatever happened in the music print design. Maybe in videos and things that were a little bit different, but luckily when you look at the artwork of most of what we're talking about in 80s music, it really wasn't that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that funky crap.
You're right.
You're right. It was actually good.
What album covers as you're
are you going to jump right into it?
He's pulling up. I'm not jumping right into it.
Gosh, I think
what strikes you most about like your favorite?
I was trying to think of some ways to group them together. And one of the coolest things I always love to look at is if it could work today, like to pull something from 20, 30 years ago or more, and can it work? Like when you ever watch an old video and you go, God, like it was really well done. Like it can actually come out today. And I think people would be like, wow, it's sophisticated. It feels now, because it didn't have anything that was too trendy. But
correct.
Two that I thought were beautiful were Ghost in the Machine by Police and Synchronicity by the Police. And I thought these were really amazing, cool, iconic, easy. Look how fast, if you saw that. One, if you saw the digital faces, LED, we all had the watches back in the day. There it is. Like you knew it was the Police. It said a lot without saying a lot, right? It's the three of them. It looks like them in just like the simplest form. And I just love that. I think like if this can come out today.
I don't think Holly ever realized that.
I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud.
You didn't know it was the three of them?
I did not know this was the three of them.
Oh, yeah. Staying with the spiky hair.
I see it now. Now I can't miss it. I can't miss it now that you're saying it. But that's how, some logos, some branding works,
But it's also, too, you might have had your own interpretation of it, and that's just what people want. No one should have the same. Then it's like vanilla, Yes. But I love that. I still remember getting that and like putting it in the clear cover.
Oh,
yeah.
When they wanted to make sure this one was pristine because it was all black and you don't want to scratch it. But then also Synchronicity. I remember this, and I remember our buddy Steve, and we got T-shirts from this concert, and I will never forget. Like I felt so cool wearing that T-shirt because of it having the black and white photography of them, like in the studio and really raw, and then these bold like color stripes
I
overlaid.
love those.
And that's, again, like we see this a lot now in duotones and what a lot of these brands, particularly digital brands, are doing to stand out. You can look at like Dropbox and all these big tech companies now. They kind of take this design trend and use it to replicate them, because now when we see a photo of a brand in their literature and they're online, they want you to know that, oh, that's Spotify or that's Pandora or whatever it is, right? But also, too, the way they did. Like I always look at I'm a huge typography fan, and I love seeing when it's something done by hand and you're not relying on a font that's already out there. That gives you instant originality because no one else is going to have that, which is really cool. So I love thinking of that. And then the other one I love this Van Halen one, because to me it was like, I want to make sure it's 1984, right? Yep.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
I'm going to ask Dave, double
course.
check on that one. But that one to me was just one of the best illustrations at the time of that baby with the wings on it and the cigarette pack. It's like,
was that an original piece of artwork?
I'm pretty sure it must have been. That's a good question. I'm going to follow up on that and maybe I'll find out.
Okay.
But it's like that rebellious little baby. And I think that's kind of a great analogy of like how they maybe saw themselves. They were just kids, but rebellious. But I'm also an angel, like, like naughty, but nice, but like, just
cigarettes
like,
in the forefront.
Yeah, like what is this telling me? Something like it's like, and that expression and everything about it. So it's like, to me, this could work today. Almost anything goes today. I mean, I don't know. I'm not everything I see, and I see a lot of people commenting on like, oh, what is the best album covers of 2019 or whatever it is, and I'm like, none of them even like talk to you anymore. I don't know. It's like
I can't even picture any of the current music that we're listening to. I can't even picture what any of the album covers look like.
Because it is just a thumbprint now. It's tough to pull up, a full length or a 12-inch album.
Yeah.
Where do you see
don't
them?
hold? I mean, that's why I think there's a kind of a resurgence of vinyl. Is that people kind of like it's nice to have something that you can hold and look through and open and kind of read the credits and kind of get the information that way instead of just kind of scrolling and trying to find out.
I love that you brought
it.
actual albums. So Dave brought actual albums.
Yeah.
Nick has all his album covers on a computer, and I have paper. I have my album covers on paper that I printed out.
We could not have been any more different with these. How we brought in our research. I love it. That's perfect. There's 3 different ways.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. Yeah.
Makes you the most tech savvy, which is obvious.
But going back to Synchronicity, another reason I loved it is because it was just those colors. It was blue, yellow, and red. And I think I remember Sting had a shirt that was just blue, yellow, red. You knew That's the album. That was the album. Like you would see those stripes,
Just the
and you
stripes.
knew just the stripes. That didn't need to say Police. You knew that was the Police record.
I was going to say, even without the name at the top, the Police. Well, the font is great. I agree with you. You don't even need it to know what it is.
Yeah. And I think the tour shirt even had just the 3 stripes.
Is that that's
Nothing
right.
else
Yeah.
mentioned.
I think you might
And then
be
I think
right.
it had the Police Synchronicity written on the back. And I think, I'm sure a lot of these bands think like they were so ahead of their time, because now brands have to do this where you can't just live off of one logo. You have to have like secondary and third versions of your logo for different applications,
Yeah.
right? So they were thinking ahead like, okay, how will this work on tour merch? Like what can we,
true.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
just stripes on the top of a hat. And so like if that can say Police Synchronicity all in one, and it's just doing it in 3 stripes, they are making a marketing campaign that people will remember, you know?
It makes it iconic. I mean,
Yep.
you still, even to this day, I mean, I see
All
those
those.
colors, and yeah, the LED, and it's
Even if you
makes
saw
it amazing. That
But there's no timestamp
Yeah.
on this synchronicity either. It doesn't say 1985 or
Right.
1982, and it could be today, and we wouldn't look at it and go, "Oh my god, that's so cheesy. That's so like 80s."
Oh, one thing I do remember about Synchronicity, I think each album was different. Like there were different photos in each album, and which made me look at, because I had heard that. I don't know how many different versions there are, and there was some limited edition, I think.
Smart idea.
But I do remember like looking through like each and every album, like
yeah.
oh yeah, okay, that's I mean it was very subtle, but you could see like okay, different photos and
remember
this.
that.
Yeah.
So did you actually pick the one you wanted to buy based on the photos?
I was hoping to find some sort of limited edition, like the golden ticket type of album. But
You know, we would have called you Charlie.
yeah, that's true. That's fine. But yeah, that was one of the. I think that a limited edition album. Take it, and see if you can find that out. And,
Did you
Now
sell
I'm
it?
gonna go looking.
no, I still have mine. Let's end it right here, and we will pick up next week with more fun and shenanigans with Nick Longo.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of our What Difference Does It Make album cover special.
Until next week, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.